Hey friends, it's Rana, and I'm here today to wrap up my Stephen King reading challenge by reviewing the four books I read by him in the month of October. I read two of his newer works and two of his older works. I ended up loving one, hating one, and finding two to be alright in the middle. And this year, through this challenge, I found out that I am actually Team New King. I prefer his newer works most of the time, and I think that because through the years, Stephen King has polished his writing skills through years and years of experience, and I prefer his newer works because they are closer to my taste and they are way less problematic than his earlier works. I'll be reviewing these books according to what I read first to what I read last, and the first book I finished is Later. It was published on the 2nd of March 2021 with 248 pages. I started my Stephen King reading challenge with Later because it is the shortest out of the four, and I listened to the audiobook because I was in a reading slump, and I'm still in a reading slump. It is the longest I've been in a reading slump, but I'm pushing myself through it. I picked the audiobook because I can only finish books while in a reading slump if I listen to the audiobook, and it turned out to be a great decision because the audiobook of Later was fantastic. Later is classified as a horror book, but it wasn't scary at all. Nothing about it screams horror. It was more of a creepy yet light paranormal thriller book. This book follows Jamie, a little kid who is raised by his single mother, and he knows absolutely nothing about his father. Jamie has an unnatural ability where he can see and speak to the dead, but only recently deceased people, and for a small, short period of time before they disappear forever. It was hard for his mother to believe him at first, but he proves her that he isn't lying, and she urges him to keep it a secret from anyone else for his safety, but somehow someone ended up finding out about his ability and they are trying to use it for their benefit. I really enjoyed this book. It was so fun. I didn't even notice how fast I flew through the audiobook. I think I finished the book in less than 2 days. It was amazing. I love the humor in it. It was just the right type and amount of humor I enjoy. And I believe that Stephen King knows how to write great ideas for stories that would make great movies. That's why most of his books are turned into blockbuster movies. Now, you may ask me, Rana, if you enjoyed this book so much, why did you give it 4 stars and not 5 stars? Well, I have two reasons. The first one is this book is written from the point of view of a kid. Most of the time, he was a kid, Jamie. But somehow, this didn't stop Stephen King from throwing his usual comments sexualizing women throughout the book. I know they weren't that bad and they were way subtle than his older books, but I would have preferred if they weren't there at all. And the second reason, and the most important one out of the two, is the unnecessary reveal at the end of the book that I believe King tried to make it shocking for us, but it ended up being really gross. If you read Later, you know what I'm talking about. But Stephen King didn't even try to elaborate it or explain the gross reveal. He just dropped the bomb and ended the book. Other than that, it was a really good King book and I really had fun reading it, except the reveal at the end. 4 out of 5 stars. The second book I finished is Billy Summers. It was published on the 3rd of August 2021 with 515 pages. This is a crime thriller book following a hitman called Billy Summers. He is really good at what he does, but the thing is, he only accepts the job if the target is a really bad person. But after all these years, he just wants to retire in peace. He is presented with one last job, a hit job, with a hefty payment. So he accepts it. This job is different though. It will take him a little bit longer to prepare for, weeks, maybe months. He is supposed to disguise himself and live in a neighborhood where he pretends to be an author writing his next novel until he gets the signal to finish his job and kill his target. Good premise, right? Or that's what I thought too. The book had a really good and solid beginning, building towards the action, the climax, the D-Day, the kill day. But then it happened. And it happened too fast and it felt way too underwhelming. Then, after the D-Day happened and he finished his target, a new character was introduced and the plot shifted 180 degrees, and then it dragged and dragged for ages and became really boring. That's one of my issues with Stephen King. He never fails to make his books a couple of hundred of pages too long. I don't know why. The other issue I have with King is his misogyny and the over sexualization of women, just as I said now about later. But these two problems were very, very present in this book. Without them, the book would have been a really decent one, but he ruined it. Billy Summers kept fancying this young lady who is more than half his age, and he knew it is wrong. He was aware of it, but he kept doing it anyway. Like, dude, stop. It's disgusting. Oh, by the way, I also really hated when we read about Billy's flashbacks to his past when he served in Fallujah. Like, I hate talking about politics here, but why Americans always like to paint themselves as heroes who suffered greatly more than anybody else when they go and fight in other countries overseas where they aren't supposed to be there in the first place, like in Iraq, Vietnam, and other places. I really didn't like the tone he kept talking about Iraqi people like they were savages and monsters, while he and his team were doing the horrible things there, became a cliche and overused trope where of the American hero soldier. Like, stop it. It was overly done. Anyway, in the end, I give this book a very generous 3 out of 5 stars. Oh, and by the way, trigger warning for very graphic descriptions of SA because it was really disturbing and graphic, and I haven't heard anyone talking about it anyway. So be aware of it because it was really graphic. Not just a mention, but a really graphic description. The next book I read, it is the first out of the two older works by him. It is Salem's Lot. It was published on the 17th of October 1975 with 668 pages. So this book is about a town that gets infected with vampires. I really wanted this book to be my next favorite King, but it ended up being my most hated one. I never gave a King book 1 star, and this one I gave 1 star. I have so many things I hated about this book, but the first one is more than half of the book was just an exposition and introducing us to a million characters who were all boring or annoying. I kid you not, the first 7 out of 15 chapters they had 0 vampires, only annoying townspeople that were going to be turned into vampires later on. They were just introduced and wasted our time reading about them for more than half of the book just for them to turn into vampires. And we won't care or give a fuck about one of them. The number of characters is just absurd, and I can't even mention one name of them. The second thing, I know it is really rare to read a King book that doesn't have at least one mention of boobs. But really, King? Jahoobies? Really? And there are way too many sexual scenes that were disgusting and unnecessary, and worst of all, came out of nowhere and added nothing to the story. The third thing I hated about this book is I felt like I was reading a book about zombies, not about vampires. Like, all the vampires in this book somehow acted like manic zombies, biting and turning everyone into vampires. At the end of the book, everyone was either dead or turned into a vampire. Like, what the fuck? Lastly, again, my apparent issue with every single Stephen King novel, it was too damn long. Like, you can edit out and cut out at least 250 pages, and it might have been a slightly more bearable read. In the end, I give this book 1 out of 5 stars, and in all honesty, it deserves none. And the last King book I read for this challenge, and the one that you must probably watching this video to know my opinion on it, is The Shining. It was published on the 28th of January 1977 with 674 pages. The Shining is arguably King's most popular and most loved novel. It follows Jack Torrance and his family, his wife Wendy, and his son Danny. Jack suffered previously from alcoholism and anger issues, which resulted in him losing his job in a school. But now he found a new job as an off-season caretaker in the Overlook Hotel, which, FYI, is a real hotel. Danny has a special ability called the Shining, hence the title of the book, but I won't even try to explain this ability because it will give me a headache. His wife, Wendy, is a loving mother who would do anything to protect her child at all costs. Bizarre things start happening when they arrive at the hotel. Will they be able to survive the harsh winter up in the mountains all alone? I went into this book knowing absolutely nothing about the story. I never read the book, I never watched the movie. The only things I knew about The Shining is the Jack Nicholson memes and the twins. Also the bloody elevator. I watched the movie after reading the book, and funny enough, two of these things aren't originally in the book. Objectively, it is a good book. I watched the movie after reading the book, and it made me appreciate the book even more because it was really bad movie. It was really cringy. People either hate the movie or love the movie, and the people who hate the movie love the book, and vice versa, but I really didn't enjoy the movie. It was so cringy. The book, it relies heavily on characters and characters' journey, struggles, and development, which is something that I don't really prefer. I'm a plot reader through and through. As always, it could have benefited from some editing, especially towards the middle of the book. A lot of dragging happened and minimal progress. As for The Shining being a horror book, I'm gonna say it. I'm not gonna be afraid. It's not even scary. Not one bit, at least for me. It's more of a character study than a horror book. You may classify it as psychological horror, but I didn't find it scary at all. I see and understand why people loved it. It is a really well written book, but it won't be my favorite King, unfortunately. I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. You can round it up to 4 stars if you want. I think it deserves it for the how well written it is and how good it was with the character study and development and all of that shenanigans. But what would have made it 5 stars for me, aside from cutting on the dragging in the middle, is if Stephen King wrote more scary scenes in this book. He had so many opportunities to insert some bone-chilling scary scenes, but he didn't. Or maybe he thought he did. P.S. The multiple use of the N-word was unnecessary. I know it was the 70s, but still. So that's it. I think I need to take a break from reading Stephen King because every time I do this challenge, he somehow drains my energy and put me in a reading slump. Yeah, I know I was already in a reading slump, but he made it even worse. At least I got out of this challenge with some positive things, like I really enjoyed later and finally got the hype surrounding The Shining, the movie and the book. And you will not catch me reading any King anytime soon because I think I really need that break from him. So that's it for today's video. I hope you liked it. Please subscribe to see my future videos and I will see you next time. Bye!